Hi, this is podcast 5, part 2, and today we're going to do mass media roles in elections. All right, so media gives you information about who the candidates are and what they stand for. A lot of times you'll read stuff in the newspaper, you'll see stuff on the news talking about the different candidates. So here's a clip from a news, I believe it's in Florida or South Carolina, talking about the candidates for sheriff.
Now to Pickens County, where voters will pick
South Carolina
next month. News 4's Kim Quintero spoke one-on-one with the candidates.
Welcome to Pickens County. Nearly 120,000 call this home. Come June 12th, voters will decide which of these three men will be the sheriff of an office that employs 138. David Stone is the incumbent. With an associate's degree in criminal justice, he began his law enforcement career more than 4 decades ago. He's currently serving his 11th term as sheriff.
The personnel that we have, we're getting things done. And we have been the lowest in the crime rate for the past decade.
Challenger Billy Looper earned a master's degree in public administration and is retired after 25 years in law enforcement at the city, county, and state levels.
The uniform patrol is always going to be the most vital element, because when you call at 3 o'clock in the morning, you call 911, that's who's coming to help you. So we need to make sure that we have enough folks out there to patrol every area of the county.
Challenger Rick Clark earned his master's degree before embarking on a law enforcement career 16 years ago at the county and educational level. He's currently the public safety director at Tri-County Tech.
Criminals don't know city limit signs, but it seems like a lot of our agencies do. And we've got to work through this intelligence-led policing system of where we're working together to get thugs off the street.
The Stand Your Ground law has been a hot-button issue not only here, but across the country. The thought is that people can use self-defense, including firearms, if there is a belief that there's a reasonable threat. We asked the candidates their thoughts on the law.
At its most basic principles, I do agree with it for what it was intended for.
Don't ever go after crime. Make sure you call 911. But when you're forced to defend yourself, you have a right to stand your ground and not flee from crime.
Law enforcement can't be at every home, or if we knew where a crime was going to be committed, certainly we'd be there. And the people, especially this day and time, that they've got to have something to protect themselves.
A political fight to serve and protect, but after 11 elections, will voters bring a new sheriff to town? Kim Quintero, WYFF News 4, Pickens.
And the candidates will face off in a debate at New Hope Church in Liberty this Sunday night.
All right, so that's how one way the candidates are identified by the media. They emphasize selected issues. It's always interesting. How does the media determine what issues they want to report on? So here's a Fox News report. You know, Fox News is always seen as very conservative, talking about a plan by the Obama administration to look at how media outlets select news stories. And as you're watching, remember we talked about bias, and just see if you can see any bias while you're watching this news report.
Well, the Obama administration set to roll out a controversial new FCC program requesting information from some radio and TV stations and newspapers about how they cover news and who decides what gets covered. Shannon Bream live in Washington. So Shannon, how is this program supposed to work?
Well, Don, the FCC is going to send representatives into TV and radio stations in various markets and ask them a whole lot of questions about things like what stories they do, how they decide their topics, who they decide to interview, what gets cut, and how much time they spend on topics from the environment to politics. The stated purpose of the study is this: to, quote, ascertain the process by which stories are selected, station priorities for content, production quality, and population served, perceived station bias, perceived percent of news dedicated to each of the 8 sins. Those are key topics that the FCC thinks should be covered. And perceived responsiveness to underserved populations. John, they say it's all about making sure that each local community is getting served in the way it specifically requires.
But there are a lot of people pretty worried about this study. Why?
Well, news of the study was enough to raise alarm for a number of GOP House members, so much so that they've sent a letter to the chairman of the FCC saying that the project showed a, quote, startling disregard for the bedrock constitutional principles that prevent government intrusion into the press. It's important to note, of course, that the FCC is the same agency that controls the licenses of these stations that they're going to study. Here's what former FCC Commissioner Robert McDowell told me about that situation.
Question is, what's the quid pro quo? How much government coercion might there be with all of this? Is the government trying to ultimately dictate speech and dictate how journalists are supposed to do their jobs? And it doesn't matter what your political strike might be, that's just not a good idea, especially when you have such a competitive communications landscape.
The study is scheduled to kick off first in Columbia, South Carolina, but earlier this week, stations there said they still haven't heard anything about it directly from the FCC. John?
Yeah, that's an interesting use of government inspection.
Taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so one thing media does is they write editorials, creating political cartoons, opinion pieces. It's important to remember anytime you're watching or reading something, whether or not you're watching something for opinion. Newspapers are supposed to tell you, TV shows are supposed to tell you whether what they're doing is releasing opinion. So here's an example of a piece that was written for the Wall Street Journal. It was not written by a journalist, written by a lady who was at the center of controversy involving the military. But it's a report talking about the opinion piece she wrote for the Wall Street Journal.
Developing this new Tampa socialite Jill Kelly is putting herself back in the spotlight, this time with an op-ed published in the Wall Street Journal. Kelly gained national attention in a scandal that brought down former CIA Director David Petraeus and the nation's top commander in Afghanistan. As our Laura Harris reports, Kelly is making some pretty harsh accusations in her letter.
Jill Kelly starts the op-ed with her reason to write. A year ago, she claimed she and her husband were spied on by federal agents, that they, quote, snooped through the private emails of she and her husband, emails that ultimately brought down the then CIA Director David Petraeus and subsequently started the ball rolling for the demise of General John Allen as well. Kelly says the anniversary is a somber reminder of the unintended consequences and harsh realities that can result from unrestrained government probing. Kelly basically saying she was a victim in all this, launched into the spotlight after she simply reported threatening emails she and her husband were receiving from an internet stalker. Fearing for their safety, she says they contacted the FBI. She says that's when the FBI violated their trust, turning them into targets of an intrusive investigation without any just cause.
Kelly ends her letter by writing, quote, "The invasion of privacy that my family endured from the federal government is not unique. Nevertheless, it is un-American." If you'd like to read the op-ed letter in its entirety, we posted a link to it on our website at abcactionnews.com.
So just make sure you know what you're reading. Is it opinion? Is it fact? And then finally, broadcasting different points of view. The media is supposed to show you, different points of view. Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. Do they always do this? Do all stations do this? I think my answer would be no. But here's an example of one of those things. This was Republican congressman's response to the president's State of the Union address in 2014.
Tonight, the president laid out his vision to once again bypass Congress, to use executive orders to run the country and to legislate from the Oval Office. This isn't an American way. The courts have not supported his past attempts, and he only does damage to the American people's confidence in government when he doesn't work with Congress to pass real reforms, especially on areas like the NSA and the abuses of the IRS and so on, where his administration has overseen abuses of personal liberty. Americans always excel when government respects their rights to liberty and their right to do what they believe is best, to strive to succeed, to fail at times, to get up and strive again. Because the American dream is not about a guarantee, it's about the guaranteed rights that allow us to succeed or fail on our own merits. That's where job creation comes from, that's where Americans want to be, and that's where the president failed to be tonight.
All right, so that was the role that mass media plays in the elections. Thanks, guys. Remember 2.5, and I'll see you in class. Bye.